Although official figures are hard to come by, it was estimated by human rights groups that up to 60,000 political dissidents were being held in jail as of late 2022, many for belonging to the wrong political party or for expressing personal views not aligned with the state. As I write this, late in 2022, I believe it is fair to say that Egypt is at its most oppressive point in its modern history. Few would contest that. Government and army officials have often been quoted saying that the long-standing emergency rule measures have been necessary to avoid the chaos of Syria or the political mayhem experienced under the Muslim Brotherhood's rule. The president, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, has explicitly stated on television that he will never allow what occurred in 2011 to happen again. People I know are in prison simply for voicing opinions or personal experiences. One friend, Ale Abdel Fattah, a blogger, computer programmer, and activist, was arrested in 2019 for a Facebook post and has been in prison ever since on fabricated charges of spreading false news that undermine national security. Freedom of speech is a calculated risk you choose to take. Yet despite this repressive atmosphere and the constant threat of censorship and silencing, what happened in the 18 months between January 2011 and July 2013, the street protests that led to the downfall of Mubarak and his clan, and the subsequent ones in 2013 that led to the ouster of Mohamed Morsi, who had become the first freely elected post-revolution president, can perhaps never entirely be reversed. What I am referring to specifically is the breaking of a fear barrier of personal and political expression. It was a surprise to everyone that the Egyptian revolution unfurled with the speed and impact that it did, even as there were indications throughout 2010 that something in the political landscape and imagination was shifting, the result of a confluence of predicaments and events. In the span of 6 months, between the summer and winter of 2010, inflation was at a record high, power cuts had become daily occurrences, and prices of basic commodities skyrocketed. That November, the parliamentary elections were rife with unprecedented thuggery and bullying at the hands of the state, which was angling for Mubarak's son, Gamal, aka Jimmy, to take the helm of the ruling National Democratic Party. He was widely expected to take over from his father, in a succession plan that was being likened to monarchy. Citizen grievances were high. People felt pressured by the inconveniences and economic difficulties of managing the very basic needs of their everyday lives. On December 31st, just weeks before the revolution erupted, a suicide bomber exploded himself outside a church in Alexandria, just as worshippers were leaving New Year's Mass, killing 21 people. The government was accused by Muslims and Christians alike of neglecting Egypt's minority Coptic community, and a week later, on Coptic Christmas Eve, tens of thousands of Muslims formed human chains around Coptic churches across the country. If suicide bombers intended to blow up the Christians and their churches, they would have to blow up the Muslims first. Adding to the backdrop of all this were protests raging in nearby Tunisia, which Egyptians watched closely via satellite television. The atmosphere in my home city of Cairo, and across many of the country's 27 other governorates, was tense. You could feel it in the air. On New Year's Day, 2011, for the online Egyptian news site Ahram Online, I wrote, "The cumulative and unprecedented peak of discontent, of the elections, the persecution, and the long-standing economic troubles that plague the majority of the nation's 80 million population, may very well serve to unite disparate groups of activists and politicians, bringing them together in a larger, more forceful movement for change. And the example of Tunisia, and the courage its youth have displayed in risking their lives, may very well be the impetus Egypt's own youth and activists need to take their activities to a new level of vitality." Less than 3 weeks later, Egyptians took to the streets of the capital in the tens of thousands, and in cities and towns across the country. I was part of the protest movement from early that morning, when there were just several hundred of us in total, marching in different groups through the city's streets. But by late that afternoon, numbers had swelled, and approximately 30,000 protesters had gathered in Tahrir